The bus, if you could call the rattling, wheezing contraption that, finally sighed to a halt, expelling me into the biting Alaskan air of Iders Pass. The name itself felt like a warning, a narrow, treacherous path one might not return from. I'd seen Remote in my time, but this was a different beast altogether. The silence here wasn't peaceful, it was heavy, pressing in from the colossal snow-dusted peaks that ringed the town like ancient sleeping giants. They seemed to watch, judging the latest piece of driftwood to wash up on their shores. That driftwood was me, Liam Kane, running on fumes in the last dregs of a hope that Alaska might be big enough to swallow my past whole. I wasn't on the run from the law, not in the way that makes for thrilling television. No, I was escaping the quieter, more insidious kind of trouble, the kind that gnaws at your soul until there's nothing left but regrets and the bitter taste of too many bad decisions. A string of dead-end jobs, a relationship that had imploded spectacularly, and a general talent for finding the bottom of every bottle and every bad situation. Alaska, I'd figured, was the geographic equivalent of hitting rock bottom with a pickaxe, hoping to strike something new. My cousin Finn was waiting, leaning against a snow-streaked pickup that looked as weary as he did. He'd aged since I last saw him, the easy grin I remembered now, etched with lines of worry around his eyes and mouth. Still, he managed a tired smile. "Liam, you made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world, Finn," I lied, my breath fogging in the frigid air. "Thanks for this. Seriously." "Don't thank me yet," he said, his voice a low rumble. He tossed my duffel bag into the truck bed. "Job's yours if you want it. Night bartender at the Hollow Hearth. It's an experience." The drive through what constituted Iders' Pass was brief. A handful of buildings huddled together as if for warmth, their windows glowing weakly against the encroaching dusk. The Hollow Hearth Lodge loomed at the edge of town, where the forest began to reclaim the land. It was an imposing structure of dark timber and stone, looking less like a welcoming inn and more like a fortress guarding secrets. The sign, a weathered plank of wood with the Hollow Hearth deeply carved into it, creaked a mournful rhythm in the wind. Inside, the air was a curious cocktail of old cedar, worn leather, wood smoke, and something else, a faint, almost metallic tang, like old coins. It wasn't unpleasant, just old, ancient even. A massive stone fireplace dominated one wall, its embers glowing like watchful eyes. A grand piano, its dark wood gleaming faintly, sat in a shadowy corner. Its keys were yellowed, like the teeth of some long-dead beast, and I had the sudden unnerving sensation that it played tunes of its own accord when no one was listening. The few patrons scattered around the room were a study in stoic silence. They nursed their drinks, their eyes occasionally flicking towards me, the newcomer, before returning to their own private worlds. No friendly nods, no curious smiles. Just a quiet, unnerving stillness. Finn led me behind the long, polished bar. "This is Silas," he said, gesturing to a man who was meticulously wiping down the already spotless counter. Silas was a man who seemed to have been carved from the Alaskan wilderness itself. Tall, lean, with a face that looked like it had weathered 1,000 storms. His eyes, the pale gray of a winter sky, were piercing and missed nothing. He didn't smile, just gave me a curt nod. "Liam Kane." It wasn't a question. "That's me," I said, trying for a confidence I didn't feel. "Ready to sling some drinks." Silas's expression didn't change. The night shift has its own rhythm, its own rules. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, like stones tumbling in a cold river. Finn clapped me on the shoulder, a little too hard. "I'll leave you to it. Silas will show you the ropes. Get you settled in the cabin out back." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, his earlier weariness replaced by a sudden, sharp intensity that chilled me more than the Alaskan air. "Listen to Silas, Liam, every damn word. He follows the rules, meticulously, That's why he's still around. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. The way he said still around sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. I looked at Silas, who was now calmly polishing a glass, his reflection staring back from its curved surface, impassive and ancient. The Hollow Hearth, I was beginning to realize, wasn't just a job. It was something else entirely, and I had a sinking feeling that the past I was trying to escape might just be the least of my worries. The first few nights at the Hollow Hearth passed in a deceptive calm. I fell into a rhythm of wiping down the bar, pouring familiar drinks for the mostly silent locals, and listening to the groan of the old lodge settling around me. The wind howled outside, a constant, mournful song, but inside, the fireplace crackled, and the shadows danced in a way that was almost cozy. Almost. I started to think Finn had been overly dramatic. Maybe Iders Pass was just another isolated town with its quirks, and Silas was just a particularly stoic, if not eccentric, night manager. I almost let myself relax. Almost. Then came the fourth night. The last patron had shuffled out into the pre-dawn gloom, leaving me and Silas in the echoing silence of the hearth. He was polishing the already gleaming bar top, his movements precise, economical. He stopped, his pale eyes fixing on me. "Shoo. You're settling in," he stated, not asked. "Trying to," I admitted. "It's quiet. Quiet is good. Quiet means the rules are being kept." He reached under the bar and produced a single sheet of paper. It was yellowed with age, the edges soft and frayed, the creases deep and permanent. Typed on it, in an old-fashioned font, was the heading, "Rules for the Night Keeper." He slid it across the bar to me. "Read them, learn them, live them." I picked it up. The paper felt brittle, almost alive in my hand. The rules were bizarre, numbered, specific, and utterly nonsensical. Han. 1. If the fire in the main hearth dims unexpectedly, do not attempt to relight it. Wait exactly 3 minutes. Not a second more, not a second less. It will either reignite on its own, or you will know what to do next. 2. Never serve any patron from the walk-in ice locker after 11:11 p.m. unless they specifically request it by the locker's true name, which you will learn in time. Otherwise, use the bar-side freezer only. 3. Should the large mirror behind the bar fog over completely when no steam is present, turn your back to it immediately. Do not look until you hear the grandfather clock in the hall chime the quarter hour. 4. Do not answer the telephone after 2 a.m. Let it ring. It is not for you. 5. If a patron orders a drink not on any menu, and you do not recognize it, offer them spring water. Only spring water. 6. The piano in the corner is not to be touched by staff. If it begins to play on its own, do not acknowledge it. Continue your duties as if nothing is amiss. There were more, a dozen in total, each stranger than the last. Rules about specific bottles, about sounds in the cellar, about knocking patterns on the back door. I looked up at Silas, a skeptical laugh bubbling in my throat. Is this some kind of hazing ritual for the new guy? Silas's expression remained unchanged, his gaze unwavering. This is not a test, Liam. These are not suggestions. You break a rule, even by accident, we all feel it. The way he said feel it made the hairs on my arms stand up. There was no threat in his voice, just a flat statement of fact, as chilling as the Alaskan wind. Before I could process the full weight of his words, the front door creaked open, admitting a gust of frigid air and 4 figures. They moved in eerie synchronicity, clad head to toe in heavy, snow-caked gear, parkas, goggles, face masks, leaving not an inch of skin exposed. They were like Arctic explorers, or perhaps something else entirely. They didn't speak, didn't even look around, just glided to the bar and stood there, 4 silent, imposing shapes. The Heralds, I'd later learn Finn called them, though he never explained what, or who, they heralded. Silas, unfazed, nodded towards them. "For them," he said, his voice low, "you use the ice locker. And these. He produced a pair of thick, elbow-length leather gloves, stiff and darkened with age, and something else I couldn't identify. The white bottle. Far back, left side. Do not touch it with your bare skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it, my first real taste of whatever strange reality governed the Hollow Hearth. Swallowing hard, I pulled on the heavy gloves. They felt strangely cold against my skin, despite their thickness. I walked towards the heavy, iron-banded door of the ice locker, the gazes of the 4 silent figures feeling like physical pressure on my back. Inside, the air was colder than the Alaskan night, a biting, unnatural chill that seemed to leach the warmth from my bones. I found the bottle, plain white ceramic, stoppered with a wax seal, no label. It felt wrong in my gloved hands. Heavier than it should be, and thrumming with a faint, almost imperceptible vibration. I carried it back to the bar, my unease growing with every step. As I placed it on the counter, Silas nodded curtly. He took 4 small, heavy tumblers from beneath the bar, glasses I hadn't seen before, and poured a small measure into each. The liquid was clear, like water, but it seemed to absorb the light rather than reflect it. The Heralds took their glasses, still silent, and drank in unison. Then, just as I was starting to think this might be the extent of the weirdness for the night, the large mirror behind the bar, the one reflecting the empty tables and the dying fire, began to fog. Not from steam, the air was cold, but from the inside out, a milky whiteness spreading across its surface like a creeping frost, obscuring the reflection entirely. Rule number 3. A voice screamed in my head. Should the large mirror behind the bar fog over completely, turn your back to it immediately. My blood ran cold. I spun around, my back to the bar, staring at the rough-hewn logs of the opposite wall, my breath catching in my throat. I could hear nothing behind me but the crackle of the fire and the faint sigh of the wind. The silence stretched, taut and heavy. I counted heartbeats, wondering what horrors were unfolding in the mirror I dared not look at. Then, the grandfather clock in the distant hall chimed, a single, resonant dong marking the quarter hour. Slowly, heart still thudding, I turned back. The Heralds were gone. Vanished as if they'd never been. The white bottle and the strange tumblers were also gone. The mirror was clear again, reflecting the mundane reality of the empty bar. Silas was wiping down the counter where they had stood, his movements methodical. He glanced at me, and for the first time I saw something akin to approval in his pale eyes. A slight, almost imperceptible nod. "Good," he said, his voice no more than a breath. "You learn quickly, that's good." I didn't feel good. I felt like I'd just tiptoed along the edge of an abyss. The rules weren't a joke, and Iders Pass was far more than just a remote Alaskan town. It was a place where the veil between worlds was terrifyingly thin. The cabin Finn had arranged for me was Spartan, but clean. A bed, a small wood stove, a table. After the incident with the Heralds and the fogging mirror, sleep was a skittish creature, easily startled. I'd taken to leaving a small oil lamp burning, a futile ward against the oppressive darkness that seemed to press in from the surrounding woods, a darkness that felt older than night itself. It was on the 3rd morning, after a restless night filled with disjointed dreams of fog and silent figures, that I found the note. Tucked under the chipped porcelain mug on my small table, it was a piece of parchment, rougher and older than the rules paper, written in an elegant, spidery script. "Welcome, Nightkeeper," it read. "A simple truth for your tenure. Keep the fire lit inside, both in hearth and heart, and never, ever ask what waits in the woods. Some doors are best left unopened, some curiosities best left unsated." Silas? Seemed too ornate for his blunt manner, but who else? The last line about the woods sent a familiar chill snaking down my spine. The woods around Iders Pass didn't just feel empty. They felt watchful, pregnant with unseen things. I crumpled the note, a surge of frustration rising. I hadn't come to Alaska to play mind games with cryptic messages. I needed answers, not more riddles. Acting on a sudden, angry impulse, I tossed the crumpled parchment into the still glowing embers of the wood stove. I expected it to catch, to burn, to turn to ash. Instead, a sound ripped through the quiet cabin, a thin, high-pitched scream, like tearing silk or tortured metal. It was brief, but undeniably real. I recoiled, heart pounding, staring at the stove. The note was gone, consumed by the embers, but the echo of that unnatural shriek lingered in the air, a stark reminder that nothing here was as it seemed. Keep the fire lit inside, it had said. Easier said than done when your welcome note screamed. That evening, the third day test, as I later termed it in my mind, arrived unannounced. The hearth was moderately busy, a handful of locals nursing beers, the usual quiet hum of hushed conversations. Suddenly, the robust fire in the main hearth, which Silas always kept meticulously tended, faltered. The flames didn't just die down. They seemed to be sucked inwards, shrinking to pathetic blue flickers before extinguishing completely, plunging the main room into a deeper gloom, illuminated only by the few bar lamps. Rule number 1. If the fire in the main hearth dims unexpectedly, do not attempt to relight it. Wait exactly 3 minutes. My stomach clenched. A nervous murmur rippled through the patrons. Old Man Hemlock, a regular who always sat by the window, grumbled and pushed his chair back. "Blasted cold settin' in. Think I'll head home." He shuffled towards the heavy oak door. "Besh." He reached for the handle, pulled. Nothing. He pulled harder, his breath misting in the cooling air. The door remained stubbornly shut, as if bolted from the outside. Panic flickered in his eyes. Another patron, a younger woman named Clara who worked at the general store, tried the door too. Same result. It was sealed tight. "What in the blazes?" Hemlock muttered, rattling the handle futilely. My eyes darted to Silas. He was calmly wiping a glass, his expression unreadable. He caught my gaze and gave a minuscule, almost imperceptible shake of his head. "Wait." The 3 minutes stretched into an eternity. The temperature in the lodge dropped noticeably. Patrons were muttering, their unease palpable. I could feel sweat prickling my palms. 1 minute. 2 minutes. I was counting seconds like a condemned man. My gaze kept flitting between the dead fireplace and the unyielding door. Then, just as I was certain 3 minutes had passed, my internal clock screaming, there was a soft whoosh from the hearth. A small flame flickered to life, then another and another, until the fire roared back with even greater intensity than before, casting warm, dancing light across the room. Simultaneously, there was a faint click from the direction of the door. Old Man Hemlock, startled, gave the handle another tentative tug. It swung open easily. He stared at it, then at the now roaring fire, then at Silas, a bewildered look on his face. Without a word, he turned and hurried out into the night. Clara followed, casting a nervous glance over her shoulder. Once they were gone, Silas spoke, his voice quiet but carrying in the suddenly less tense atmosphere. "The Heralds you met, they are merely couriers, messengers. There are older things here, things that seep. The rules are the banks of the river. They keep things flowing where they should. Seep." The word conjured unsettling images of something insidious, something that didn't knock but simply oozed through the cracks. Later, well after the last patron had departed, as the clock crept towards 2 a.m., the old rotary phone behind the bar shrilled. Its ring was jarring, harsh in the profound silence. I instinctively reached for it. "Don't," Silas said, his voice sharp. Rule number 4. Do not answer the telephone after 2 a.m. Let it ring. It is not for you. The phone shrieked again and again, a relentless, demanding summons. Each ring felt like a needle prick against my nerves. It rang perhaps 10 times, then fell silent. leaving an even deeper quiet in its wake. Who or what calls then? I finally managed, my voice raspy. Silas just shook his head, offering no explanation. Some doors best left unopened. He finished wiping the counter, then looked towards the walk-in ice locker. Tomorrow, before your shift, the locker needs cleaning, top to bottom. He paused, his gaze distant, almost as if he were speaking of a sacred, forbidden place. It is the place we don't open unless they ask. Treat it with respect. Cleaning an ice locker seemed mundane enough. But after screaming notes, phantom fire starters, self-locking doors, and phone calls from God knows what, I had a sinking feeling that cleaning Silas's special ice locker would be anything but ordinary. Respect, he'd said. I was beginning to understand that respect here at the Hollow Hearth was just another word for fear. The next afternoon, long before the first shadow of dusk touched Iders' pass, I stood before the walk-in ice locker, a bucket of hot, soapy water in one hand and a bundle of rags in the other. Silas's words from the night before echoed in my mind. The place we don't open unless they ask. Treat it with respect. Respect. Right. My stomach was doing a fair impression of a cement mixer. The door, heavy and iron-bound, swung open with a reluctant groan, releasing a blast of air so cold it felt like needles on my skin. It wasn't just cold, it was an ancient, tomb-like chill that had nothing to do with refrigeration technology, and the shape of it wasn't a standard utilitarian box. The back wall was distinctly curved, making the small space feel almost circular, like the inside of a forgotten well. Shelves lined the curved wall, laden with bottles, so many bottles, not your usual bar stock. These were an odd assortment of shapes and sizes, crafted from dark, smoked glass, opaque ceramic, even what looked like tarnished silver. Some were stoppered with corks sealed heavily, with black or crimson wax. Others had no labels at all, their contents a mystery. As my eyes adjusted to the dim, solitary bulb flickering overhead, I noticed stranger details. A squat, dark green bottle seemed to pulse with a faint internal luminescence, like a trapped firefly. Another, tall and slender, vibrated almost imperceptibly against the metal shelf. I blinked, thinking it was the cold playing tricks on my eyes, but no, it was definitely moving, a faint, rhythmic tremor. I decided not to touch that one if I could help it. As I began to wipe down the shelves, starting from the top as instructed, my hand brushed against something wedged between a row of dusty, unidentifiable spirits and the cold metal wall. It was a notebook, relatively small, bound in what looked like faded leather and sealed with a thick, unbroken blob of dark red wax. My curiosity, a persistent and often troublesome companion, got the better of me. I glanced back at the closed door, then carefully worked a fingernail under the wax seal. It cracked with a dry, brittle sound. The pages within were filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. The ink faded in places. It was a log, a journal, a keeper's journal. October 17th. Rule 3 failed. Mirror screamed for a full minute. Heralds gone. Just gone. His coat still on the peg. My blood turned to ice water. Herald? Was that the previous night keeper? November 2nd. Fire wouldn't light for an hour. Smell of wet earth from the cellar. Silas says it's restless. Cut a smell. December 9th. They sent a woman. Pale, like the winter moon. Asked for the red bottle by name. Silas refused. Said the price was too high. She didn't argue. Just smiled. A smile that promised an eternity of cold. The entries were sporadic, unsettling. Each one a tiny, terrifying window into the ongoing strangeness of the Hollow Hearth. I flipped towards the end, my hand trembling slightly. The last entry, scrawled in a more desperate hand, was short and chilling. If you hear your name whispered when no one is there, it's already too late. I slammed the notebook shut, my heart hammering. Too late for what? I shoved it deep into my jacket pocket, a cold weight against my ribs. The moving bottle on the shelf suddenly seemed far more menacing. Later, as I prepared for the evening shift, the main hearth fire refused to light. The kindling was dry, the logs seasoned, but the flames I tried to coax from the matches simply died, sputtering out with a pathetic hiss. After several failed attempts, Silas emerged from the back, carrying a small, woven pouch. He didn't speak, just knelt before the hearth. From the pouch, he sprinkled a mixture of dried herbs, something that smelled sharply of pine, sage, and something else, something acrid and unfamiliar, onto the logs. He then struck a single match, and the fire erupted with an almost violent whoosh, roaring to life, the flames an unnaturally vibrant orange. He simply nodded, the ritual complete. Lekis seems forle wistu. The night brought a new kind of visitor. He wasn't one of the heralds. This man was old, gaunt, his skin stretched thin over sharp cheekbones, his eyes like chips of ice. He moved with a slow, deliberate stiffness, as if his joints were frozen. He didn't sit at a table but came directly to the bar. "Frostbite gin," he rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. I searched the shelves. "Sorry, sir, I don't think we stock that." The gaunt man didn't react, just stared at me. A thin layer of actual frost began to form on the polished bar top where his skeletal fingers rested. It spread outwards in delicate, feathery patterns. "They don't ask, Liam," Silas said quietly from beside me, his voice low. "They remind." The gaunt man slowly retracted his hand, the frost remaining. He gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod, then turned and glided out as silently as he'd entered, leaving the chill of his presence and the icy filigree on the bar. Silas wiped the frost away with a cloth, his expression grim. Some carry the cold with them. My shift ended, the uneasy quiet of the early morning settling in. As I walked back to my cabin, the frigid air biting at my exposed skin, my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text message from an unknown number. "OB, next time, bring salt. The door won't stay shut on intention alone. The point turn. Point 2 fee 1. The point turn. Point 4 Daria. 2. Point turn. Point 4's Nikon bin. My exalt." What door? The main entrance? The ice locker? And who the hell was texting me these cryptic warnings? I looked around at the silent, snow-covered trees, the dark bulk of the lodge. The feeling of being watched, of being a small, insignificant piece in a very large, very old game, was stronger than ever. The notebook in my pocket felt heavier than lead. The following day, Iders Pass was shrouded in an eerie stillness. When I arrived for my shift, the Hollow Hearth was dark. Not just dim, but utterly unlit, the heavy front door bearing a crudely lettered closed sign I hadn't seen before. My calls to Finn's cell went straight to voicemail. Even Silas's cabin, a small, solitary structure a little deeper in the woods than mine, was silent and shuttered. It was unnerving. The hearth was the town's pulse, however faint. To find it lifeless felt profoundly wrong. Unease prickled at me as I returned to my own cabin. The air felt charged, expectant. The wood I'd stacked by the stove, previously dry and seasoned, was now inexplicably damp, almost soaked, as if it had been left out in a torrential downpour that never happened. Stepping outside to investigate, I found it. A perfect, wide circle pressed into the snow about 20 feet from my cabin door. Not footprints, not animal tracks, just a massive circular indentation, as if something immense and round had rested there. My blood ran cold. Never ask what waits in the woods. The note's warning echoed in my mind. Asadains anol true. Then I saw the window. On the frosted pane of my small cabin window, traced with a delicate, almost skeletal finger, was a single word. Come. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This wasn't Silas's doing. This felt different, older, more elemental. I spent the rest of the day on edge, jumping at every creak of the cabin, every rustle of the wind in the pines. The silence from the hearth was a heavy, suffocating blanket. As dusk bled into true night, a faint glow appeared from the direction of the lodge. Hope, or perhaps a morbid curiosity, propelled me forward. The closed sign was gone. Inside, Silas was behind the bar, his face looking even more drawn and weary than usual. The fire in the hearth burned low, casting long, dancing shadows. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. The place was locked up tight. "Preparations," he said, his voice flat. "Sometimes the hearth needs to rest, to gather itself." He looked past me, towards the door, his pale eyes narrowed. "Someone else is coming tonight. Someone for whom the rules weren't specifically written." My unease intensified. "What does that mean?" "It means you watch, you listen, and you do exactly as I say." We didn't have to wait long. The door creaked open, admitting not a blast of cold air, but a peculiar, shimmering chill, like the air around a hidden glacier. She was tall, slender, and moved with an ethereal grace that seemed to defy gravity. Her dress was the color of frost on a winter window pane, intricate patterns of ice crystals woven into the fabric. Her skin was a pale, luminous blue like moonlight on snow, and her hair, the white of a snowdrift, cascaded around her shoulders. Her eyes were the most startling, a piercing, silver blue, ancient and knowing. She was beautiful in a terrifying, inhuman way. She glided to the bar, the air around her noticeably colder. The low burning fire in the hearth seemed to shrink away from her presence. "Something cold," she said, her voice like the chime of delicate ice crystals, melodic yet brittle. "Something bound." Silas, his face an unreadable mask, reached under the counter. He didn't go to the ice locker. Instead, he produced a small, plain stone bottle sealed with silver wax. He poured a clear, viscous liquid into a crystal glass, one I'd never seen before, and pushed it towards her. She picked it up, her long, pale fingers brushing the glass. "Thank you, Keeper," she said, her silver blue eyes flicking to me for a fleeting moment, a gaze that seemed to see right through me. She took a delicate sip. Then, she reached into a fold of her frost-like dress and produced something that glinted in the dim light. She placed it on the bar. An ice coin. Not actual ice that would melt, but something that looked like it, perfectly formed, intricately patterned, and radiating an intense cold. Her gaze fell on my jacket pocket, where the old notebook was hidden. A faint, sad smile touched her lips. "I see you found my offering." My hand instinctively went to the notebook. This was yours?" "I left it when I still had a name they remembered," she said, her voice tinged with a profound melancholy. "Before the frost claimed more than just my warmth. Be careful, Liam Kane. The white elk walks these woods now. It calls to those who listen too closely." The white elk. The name sent a shiver through me. Another piece of the Iders Pass puzzle. Another layer of unsettling mystery. After the woman of frost had departed as silently and gracefully as she'd arrived, leaving only the ice coin and a lingering chill, I turned to Silas. "Who was that?" What did she mean, when I still had a name? Silas was staring at the ice coin, his expression uncharacteristically troubled. "Some keepers, they lose themselves to the job, Liam. To the hearth. To this place." He picked up the ice coin, his fingers careful not to touch it for too long. "Their identities, their very names, can be rewritten, faded, claimed by what they serve. Or what serves them." He looked at me then, his pale eyes holding a warning I couldn't ignore. "This place remembers, Liam. It remembers every keeper, and it has a long memory." The implication hung heavy in the air. I wasn't just a bartender, I was a keeper. And the job description seemed to include the potential loss of my very self. The screaming note, the rules, the heralds, the gaunt man, and now this ethereal woman of frost. I was sinking deeper and deeper into something ancient and terrifying, and the shores of my old life were rapidly receding from view. The Woman of Frost's warning about the white elk echoed in my mind for days. I found myself scanning the tree line more often, listening for sounds beyond the usual rustle of wind and creak of branch. Sleep offered little respite, filled with dreams of silent, snow-covered forests and eyes like chips of ice. The notebook, Seraphina's notebook, for I had decided that must be her name, the S on the welcome note now making a chilling kind of sense, felt like a lead weight in my pocket, a constant reminder of the precarious path I was treading. It was a week later, during a particularly quiet night shift. The hearth was empty, save for myself and Silas, who was meticulously polishing the already gleaming brass rail of the bar. Outside, a fresh blanket of snow had fallen, muffling the world in a soft, white silence. I was wiping down a table near the large front window when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light, a phantom conjured by my overactive imagination. But no, it was real. Standing at the edge of the woods, partially obscured by the falling snow, was an elk. It was magnificent, larger than any elk I'd ever seen, its antlers like a crown of bare white branches. And its coat was the pure, unblemished white of freshly fallen snow, almost luminous in the dim glow spilling from the hearth's windows. The white elk. It stood perfectly still, its head raised, its dark eyes fixed directly on the lodge, on me. I felt a strange pull, an inexplicable urge to go outside, to approach it, I didn't know what. It wasn't a menacing presence, not exactly, but there was an undeniable power emanating from it, an ancient, primal call. It calls to those who listen too closely. Seraphina's words. Good. I didn't move. I just stared, transfixed. Then, as if sensing my internal struggle, it let out a soft, almost mournful snort, its breath pluming in the frigid air. It turned its head slowly, gave one last look at the hollow hearth, and then, with a grace that belied its size, melted back into the shadows of the forest, vanishing as silently as it had appeared. A sharp crack shattered the silence. I flinched, spinning around. The large mirror behind the bar, the one that had fogged over for the Heralds, now bore a thin, jagged crack, spiderwebbing from one corner towards the center. Silas was staring at it, his face grim. You saw it. The white elk, I breathed, my voice barely a whisper. It was just standing there. You didn't go out? No. Seraphina warned me. Silas nodded slowly. Good. Some invitations are best declined. He ran a finger along the new crack in the mirror, but every choice has a consequence here. The next morning, Silas was gone. Not just from the hearth, but from his cabin, too. His few belongings, neatly packed, were gone. No note, no explanation. Just an empty space where a stoic, rule-following night manager used to be. The hearth felt colder, emptier without his quiet, unsettling presence. Panic, cold and sharp, began to set in. Was this it? Was I on my own now, left to navigate these bizarre rules and increasingly sinister occurrences by myself? Just as I was contemplating packing my own meager bags, the door of the hearth creaked open and Finn stumbled in. He looked terrible. Older than I'd ever seen him, his face etched with exhaustion, his eyes bloodshot and haunted. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. He leaned heavily against the bar, his breath ragged. Finn, what happened? Where's Silas? He just shook his head, looking past me, his gaze unfocused. He fulfilled his time. The elk, it's a sign. He fumbled in his pocket and produced a small, folded piece of paper, newer than the original rules, the ink still fresh. He smoothed it out on the bar. It was a single, handwritten rule. Rule 13. If the white elk returns to the tree line, and its gaze meets yours, Close your eyes and count to 100. Do not open them sooner, no matter what you hear. Silas left this, Finn said, his voice hoarse. He said it was time for a new rule. He looked at me then, a desperate, pleading look in his tired eyes. Liam, I can't do this anymore. This town, it takes too much. Before I could respond, he was gone, stumbling back out into the gray Alaskan morning, leaving me alone with a new, terrifying rule and the heavy weight of Silas's disappearance. Later that day, drawn by an instinct I couldn't explain, I found myself walking towards the old, dilapidated church on the outskirts of Iders Pass. Its steeple was crumbling, its windows boarded up. I'd never paid it much attention before, but today it felt significant. Seraphina was there, standing in the dusty, dilapidated nave, shafts of weak sunlight filtering through cracks in the boarded windows, illuminating swirling dust motes. She looked even more ethereal in the dim, hallowed light. "He's gone, isn't he?" she asked, her voice a soft whisper that seemed to echo in the vast emptiness. "Silas? Yes. Finn too, I think. He looked broken," she nodded sadly. "The cycle continues, the roles shift." She held out a delicate pale hand. In her palm lay a thin, rolled-up piece of parchment, tied with a silver thread. A legacy of sorts. I unrolled it. It was a list of names, written in the same elegant script as the welcome note. Dugan, Harold, Silas. At the bottom, penciled in a slightly different, more hesitant hand, was another name. Liam. My name. My breath hitched. This wasn't just a job. It was a lineage. A cursed inheritance. "What is this?" I managed. "Keepers of the hearth," Seraphina said. "Those who have tended the threshold. There are always keepers." She gestured towards the ice locker in my memory. "There is a back wall in the freezer, Liam. A section that wasn't always there. Do not try to open it. Not unless the bottles themselves begin to move." Then, and only then, a cold dread seeped into my bones. A back wall? More secrets hidden within secrets. I looked down at the list of names. Dugan, Harold, Silas, Liam. What had happened to Dugan and Harold? The notebook mentioned Harold was gone. Driven by a sudden, inexplicable urge, I fumbled for my lighter. I held the flame to the parchment. As it caught, the names on the list didn't just burn, they screamed. Thin, reedy whispers at first, then rising to a chorus of despairing cries, echoing the sound of the note I'd burned in my cabin. The sound of trapped souls. I dropped the burning list, watching as the names curled into ash, the screams fading into the dusty silence of the old church. Seraphina watched me, her silver-blue eyes filled with an ancient sorrow. The legacy was now mine, whether I wanted it or not, and the hearth, it seemed, was far from done with me. The days following Silas's departure and Finn's broken retreat were heavy with an unspoken dread. The hearth felt different, emptier, yet somehow more aware. I was truly alone now. The weight of the rules, the journal, and Seraphina's cryptic warnings pressing down on me. The cracked mirror served as a constant, unsettling reminder of the white elk and the fragile barrier between my perceived reality and whatever lay just beyond it. Then the blizzard hit. Not a gentle snowfall, but a raging white fury that descended upon Iders Pass with savage intensity. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the ancient timbers of the Hollow Hearth, threatening to rip the roof from its moorings. Snow piled in monstrous drifts, isolating the lodge completely, transforming the familiar landscape into an alien white wasteland. Inside, the atmosphere grew increasingly strange. The crack in the bar mirror, which had remained static for days, began to spread. Not in a jagged, splintering way, but smoothly, as if an invisible hand were drawing new lines across its surface. Then, the entire mirror cleared. Not to reflect the dimly lit bar, but to show something else entirely. A vision. I saw a snow-buried forest, silent and deep, the trees skeletal and black against the white, and in the distance, a lone figure, indistinct and cloaked, moving slowly through the drifts. The vision shimmered, then faded, leaving the mirror clear once more, reflecting only my own pale, anxious face. The fire in the main hearth, which I'd painstakingly tended, suddenly burned with an unnatural, vibrant blue flame. It danced and writhed, casting eerie, flickering shadows. Then the flames coalesced, forming a distinct pattern on the hearthstones. 5 interlocking circles, glowing with an intense sapphire light. I'd seen that symbol before, etched faintly on the cover of Seraphina's notebook. A low groan emanated from the floorboards, a sound like the lodge itself was sighing in its sleep. Then, with a sudden, sharp crack, the cellar door, a heavy trapdoor-style entrance set into the floor behind the bar, creaked open on its own. A gust of damp, earthy air, carrying the scent of wet stone and something else, something metallic and vaguely unsettling, wafted up. I'd never been down there. Silas had always handled whatever needed doing in the cellar. Augusta, my heart hammered against my ribs. This was wrong. All of it. The blizzard, the mirror, the blue fire, the self-opening cellar door. It felt like the hearth itself was awakening, or perhaps opening. Hesitantly, I grabbed an old oil lantern, its flame sputtering in the drafts, and peered down into the darkness. Steep, stone steps disappeared into the gloom. Swallowing my fear, I descended. The air grew colder, damper with each step. The cellar was larger than I expected, a labyrinth of low stone arches and shadowy recesses. And the bottles, they were everywhere, not neatly arranged on shelves like in the ice locker, but scattered, jumbled, as if a poltergeist had run amok. Some were overturned, their strange contents pooling on the dusty floor. Then I saw it. The bottles weren't just scattered, they seemed to have been deliberately rearranged, forming a clear path towards a section of the far wall. A section of wall that, like the back of the ice locker Seraphina had warned me about, looked newer. The stones were different, less weathered. As I watched, a thin crack appeared in this section of wall, then another, spreading like ice fracturing. With a deep, grating sound, the wall split open, revealing a dark, narrow passage beyond, leading into unimaginable blackness. From the depths of that passage, a voice whispered, soft and sibilant, yet carrying clearly in the stillness. "Keeper!" A flicker of movement from the top of the stairs. It was Seraphina, or something very much like her. She carried a small, ornate hourglass lantern, the sand within glowing with a faint, silvery light. Her frost-like dress seemed to shimmer, and her silver-blue eyes were fixed on the newly opened passage. "The Hollow has chosen you, Liam Kane," she said, her voice devoid of its earlier melancholy, now imbued with a chilling finality. "It calls for its due." As if on cue, the notebook in my pocket, Seraphina's notebook, grew warm. I pulled it out. A new entry, in fresh, glistening ink that seemed to appear even as I watched, was forming on a previously blank page. Rule Addendum. If the door below opens without the name being spoken, the keeper must bind the path with fire and blood, else the Hollow feeds. Bind the path? Fire and blood? Before I could process the terrifying implications, the main door of the hearth burst open, and Finn stumbled in, covered in snow, looking even more ragged and desperate than before. He wasn't alone. He clutched a bundle of dried sage, a piece of white chalk, and a small, stoppered vial filled with a dark, viscous red liquid. "Payment," he gasped, his eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own. "Payment for when it really opens. Silas told me what to bring if this ever happened." The building groaned again, a deep, resonant sound that vibrated through my bones. Something scraped heavily against the outside window, a sound like giant claws on timber. Finn thrust the items into my hands. "The chalk for the threshold, sage to purify. The The other is for the binding. My mind reeled. This was beyond rules, beyond strange patrons. This was something ancient, something hungry. The hollow. With trembling hands, I took the chalk and began to draw the 5-circle pattern I'd seen in the blue flames, around the entrance to the newly opened passage in the cellar. The sage, when lit, filled the air with a pungent, cleansing smoke. The building shuddered around us. As I finished the chalk markings, I noticed something new etched into the fogged surface of the bar mirror upstairs, visible even from the cellar steps. Don't open the 5th bottle. The 5th bottle. There was no 5th bottle on any list. But I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the core, which one it meant. A plain, unassuming bottle I'd seen tucked away in the deepest corner of the ice locker, always ignored, always untouched. I scrambled back up the stairs, located it, its glass cold and inert in my hand, and locked it away in the old, seldom-used safe beneath the bar. Whatever was happening, that bottle, it seemed, was a key to something I wasn't ready to unlock. The scraping at the window came again, louder this time. The hollow was waiting. The blizzard raged for another day, imprisoning me within the groaning, watchful confines of the Hollow Hearth. The passage in the cellar remained, a dark, silent maw, the chalk circles and the lingering scent of sage, a fragile ward against whatever lay within. The 5th bottle remained locked in the safe, a cold, heavy secret. Finn had vanished again, swallowed by the storm as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving me with the chilling tools of a ritual I barely understood. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the old lodge, every howl of the wind, sounded like the approach of something dreadful. Then, as abruptly as it began, the blizzard ceased. The wind died down, and an unnerving silence descended, broken only by the drip of melting snow. On the 3rd morning, as the weak Alaskan sun tried to pierce the gloom, I found it. Lying on the bar, directly in front of the now clear mirror, was the key to the safe. Beside it, a small, folded piece of parchment, identical to the one that had held the 13th rule. This one bore a simple, stark message, written in what I now recognized as Silas's precise script. Midnight. Hollow tree. Come alone. The hollow tree. I knew the one. An ancient, gnarled cottonwood on the edge of the woods, its trunk mostly hollowed out by age and the elements. A landmark whispered about in local lore, though I'd never paid it much mind. Until now. The key felt heavy in my palm, a cold weight of inevitability. The 5th bottle. Midnight. The hours crawled by. Part of me screamed to ignore the summons, to barricade myself in the hearth, to pretend none of this was happening. But another, deeper part, the part that had accepted the screaming notes in the silent heralds, knew I had no choice. This was the path I was on, the role I had inherited. Keeper. As midnight approached, I bundled up against the lingering chill and stepped out into the crisp, clean air. The snow crunched under my boots, the only sound in the vast, silent landscape. The hollow tree loomed ahead, a dark sentinel against the star-dusted sky. Its hollowed-out trunk was a gaping blackness, like a doorway to another world. My heart pounded as I approached. With trembling fingers, I inserted the key into the lock of the safe I'd dragged out there earlier, containing the 5th bottle. The tumblers clicked. I opened the safe, took out the unassuming bottle, its contents dark and unreadable. Then, I turned to the tree. As if sensing my intent, a section of the gnarled bark within the hollow shifted. It wasn't a door in the conventional sense, but the wood itself seemed to part, revealing a narrow, winding path leading downwards, into the earth. The air that emanated from it was cold, ancient, and smelled of damp soil and something else, something faintly metallic like old blood. Stepping through the opening, I found myself in a surprisingly large, circular chamber lit by an unseen source that cast long, dancing shadows. And they were waiting. Kale, Ilara, Orin, Reese, and Bram. The Heralds. No longer clad in their anonymous snow gear, their faces were now visible, sharp-featured, and unnervingly similar, their eyes holding an ancient, watchful intelligence. They were still imposing, but no longer just silent specters. Kale, who seemed to be their leader, stepped forward. His voice, when he spoke, was a low rumble, like distant thunder. "Liam Kane, the Keeper, you have come." "What is this place?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "What do you want?" "This is a threshold," Ilara said, her voice softer, like wind through dry reeds. "One of many. The choice you made in the cellar, to bind the path, was noted." Orin gestured to the center of the chamber. There, on a low stone pedestal, sat a simple obsidian bowl, its surface gleaming in the dim light. "The fifth bottle," Race stated, his gaze intense. "It holds a question and a choice." Bram, silent until now, simply pointed from the bottle in my hand to the bowl. Kale spoke again. "You may drink of its contents, Keeper, claim what it offers, or you may pour it into the bowl, an offering to the balance." Drink it? The thought sent a shiver of revulsion through me. What ancient, unknowable power did it contain? What would it make me? I thought of Silas, of his weariness, of Seraphina's lost name. Without hesitation, I uncorked the bottle. The liquid within was black, viscous, and seemed to absorb the light. I tilted the bottle, and the dark fluid streamed into the obsidian bowl. As the last drop fell, the liquid in the bowl hissed, a sound like steam escaping under pressure. Words formed in the rising vapor, shimmering in the air before dissipating. The door remembers. The door remains. The path behind me, the one leading back to the hollow tree, slowly began to close, the wood sealing itself shut with a soft, final groan. Panic flared, but Kale raised a hand. "The balance holds. For now. Another way will open for you, Keeper." As if summoned by his words, the shadows in the chamber shifted, and other figures emerged, stepping from recesses I hadn't noticed. Men and women, their attire varied, some looking as ancient as the Heralds, others more contemporary, yet all sharing the same watchful, knowing look in their eyes. "Agnes," one woman said, nodding to me, her face kind but etched with a deep weariness. "Gus," rumbled a burly man beside her. "Ren. Elias." They were keepers, keepers from other crossings, other thresholds. "We felt the hollow open," Agnes explained. "We felt the choice you made. The balance holds, for now." There was a quiet understanding among them, a shared burden. I was one of them. Eventually, as a new dawn began to filter through unseen cracks above, another passage opened, this one leading upwards, towards a faint gray light. I returned to the hollow hearth. The fire was out, the ashes cold, the mirror was clean, reflecting only the mundane interior of the bar. It was as if the blizzard, the blue fire, the open cellar had been a fever dream. But I knew it was real. Months passed. I tended the bar, I walked to the hollow tree, sometimes finding small, cryptic messages left on its bark. "Hold the threshold. The wayward are coming." I learned the true names of the ice locker and its contents. I added new rules to the yellowed paper, rules born of my own experiences. 14. If a coin of ice is left as payment, leave it on the bar until the first ray of dawn touches it. It will be gone by sunrise. 15. The white elk is a guardian, not a threat, unless you try to follow where it leads. 16. Salt the cellar threshold after every full moon. I was no longer Liam Kane, the man running from his past. I was Liam Kane, keeper of the Hollow Hearth, guardian of a threshold I was only beginning to understand. The job was strange, terrifying and unending. But it was mine. And the night, with all its whispers and shadows, was my domain.